and thanks for tuning in to WACA TV's new business series, True Business Ownership with Rita Coco. I'm Rita, and I want to welcome back those viewers who have joined us for episode 1 and 2 of True Business Ownership with Rita Coco. Thanks for coming back, and I hope you've been enjoying these episodes as others have too. If you are new to the episode or to the series, welcome, welcome. Please know that there are 2 episodes on the WACA TV website. Episode 1 was on selling a business, and episode 2 was on business valuation. Now, before you touch that remote and think, wait, I'm like 30 years away from selling a business and getting a business valuation. Let me clarify something. If you knew what your last year in business looked like today, then you could start today to contribute to that last year with 2022 goals. And that's what we're doing. We're starting with the end in mind, and over time, every month we have a new episode. We go backwards to that startup date that was, maybe a couple of years ago for some of you, maybe 10 years. And maybe some of you are at the end of your time as the leader in your business, and you do want to get information about selling your business. So today, this episode is for everybody. And our episode is number 3, and it is the legal aspects of selling a business. And we have attorney Jeremy Bombard today, but before I introduce him and say hello, let me give you some background on why True Business Ownership with Rita Coco exists. I'm a small business owner, and I have been working with business owners since, for 21 years. And I've been taking businesses to their next level, significantly growing their business, but something happened in those times when people went from next level to next level to next level. There was a lot of suffering involved, and there was a lot of sacrificing. And over time, people were saying, do I really want to get to this next level? I don't know if I have it in me anymore. And so I said, I've got to do something. And I did. I put together what I call a 12-stage program, not a step program, a 12-step, but a 12-stage program that for every single growth stage that a small business would go to, there was less sacrifice and less suffering because of the business practices that were best practices that were available to them that they could use. So every episode brings a set of best practices along to our viewers. So it doesn't matter if you're 30 years to go, 10, 20, 5, or just 1. Every single episode will help you to get a better business going, significantly grow that business, plus also making sure that you have more time for you. So now let me introduce Jeremy, attorney Jeremy Bombard. Welcome, Jeremy. I'm excited to have you aboard.
Thank you, Rita. I'm very excited to be here.
Great. Before you start, Jeremy, I want to give people a little bit of background about you, and then we will hear from Jeremy about how to get that legal aspects of the business going when you're in that sell mode. So attorney Jeremy works with small and publicly held businesses as a business attorney, and he does several things. He does incorporations. He negotiates contracts. Yes, he does help people with buying, but today he's going to be talking about how people sell and what has to be done. And he uses various other corporate strategies for corporate needs that are legal. When necessary, Jeremy will do litigation and help with risk assessment. And he acts as an outside general counsel, he says, to ensure that companies' legal rights are protected while they're in that litigation. So that's who we have here today. Again, I've worked with Jeremy. I've brought my clients to Jeremy, and I am thrilled that he's here today to help us understand about the legal aspects of selling. So let's get right to it, Jeremy. I have a statement, more than a question, that you want to divide your time today with us into 2 sections. first section being about what we need to prepare to have a conversation before we call 1-800-JEREMY. And then once we're on the phone with you, what the flow is that you take us through as a person selling. So let's start with the flow. What do we have to prepare for, Jeremy?
Thank you, Rita. Again, thank you again for having me. And I think this is a good episode to have. And you hit the nail right on the head, right off the gate, when you said, if your client says, well, I'm not ready to sell now or next year or 10 years down the road, it doesn't matter. You should be thinking about it from the very beginning, because a lot of clients forget their business is an asset. It's worth money. But it helps to have that process in place earlier rather than later, because then you're not rushing at the very end or you're missing information. And Rita, I think you're the person, and I try to refer to my clients as much as possible, because I think that's what you assist clients with, is getting them in that right mind frame to think about the future. I'm sure you have the same issue. Clients think about today, tomorrow, tomorrow. They don't think about next week. But guess what? Next week always happens. So I think you're the first person to get on board. Get you into the business. Start the clients thinking about that, and at least give them a roadmap, because some clients feel that when they're ready to sell their business, they snap their fingers, they call me, and it just magically gets sold. And Rita, you and I both know that's never the way these things work. I guess the first question people always has are, what's my business worth? And the simple answer is whatever somebody's willing to pay for it. But at the same time, there are a lot of numbers that you need to look at. You need to make sure your financials are in order. You need to figure out, what's your income, what's your profit and loss, because guess what? That's what the buyer is going to look at. You had Dave McLaren on last time. He's a great CPA to look at those numbers. And not only look at those numbers, but Rita, sometimes we all got to work together to make sure that our client gets those numbers in order. In a form that a buyer can look at and understand. So once we get that aspect done, then there's the question of, all right, my business is ready. Where's the buyers? Well, again, you just don't magically snap your fingers and a buyer walks up. Although that does happen sometimes, but it's not as often as you would think. Next step, get a business broker. Get your business out there. You had that, Bob, the first episode, he talked about how to get your business out there, get it marketed, get it enticed, get in front of the right people. So you have those buyers that come to you and say, all right, I saw this business for sale. This is exactly what I'm looking for. I want to buy this business. Now you do that, you get the buyer. The first thing the buyer is going to do is going to want to look at your financials, and eventually they're going to make an offer. And as soon as they make the offer, that's when you pick up the phone to call me, because at that offer stage, you want to make sure you have an attorney, because that offer will have some binding language. It's not the actual agreement, but as in a residential purchase, you have your offer and that has some agreements. So when you finally get that buyer that walks in the door and says, here's my offer to buy your business, that's when you pick up the phone for me.
Oh, Jeremy, I'm so glad you went through the process to get to you, because yes, we do have 2 episodes to the point you've been making. Bob Carlos came on. The first episode is how to sell that business and what it takes and what a business broker will bring to the business. Keeping in mind that it's not always about a business broker. You might even have an investment firm or a equity firm, right?
There could be a venture capitalist that comes in.
Yeah, and still you need to know. I've had clients saying, well, where do I begin? I'm getting courted. I don't even know where I get. So they're not even at the stage of selling, or so they think. They think, oh goodness, I don't know if I'm ready. And then all of a sudden, I put them in front of you and I say, well, here's what we need to think about. So that's true. And then having Dave McLaren in, the CPA, who talks about business val. And to your point, Jeremy, the depending on the type of buyer, there's a huge difference in what your value can be, even though your profit may look the same to you, not to a buyer. So that's huge. And yes, I'm there right after someone gets established to significantly grow that business, because it takes a lot of energy to grow 2 to 10 times your size. So right. So we're here for the business owner, but now let's talk about what you do.
Absolutely. So you got that buyer that comes in, they give you that offer. Now it's my time to step in and determine what the next steps are and how we're going to get from the offer to the sale. And the trick is to make it as easy and seamless as possible. But as you know, Rita, that it doesn't always happen that way. But the quicker you get me involved, the better we can go from there. Rita, you and I had the discussion of what's the difference between an asset sale and a stock sale. And a lot of times it's an asset sale where the assets, the quote unquote assets of the business, are sold to the buyer. So then that begs the question, which assets are you selling? And again, this is why I'm important, because I can get the client thinking about things that they're keeping and not keeping, because once you get it on paper, you sort of realize, here's the things I'm selling. Oh no, wait, I don't want to sell this truck. This is my own personal truck that I use for my business or for my daily use. I want to keep this when the sale happens. And that's all, it's all negotiable. And that's what I tell my clients, like, well, what can I keep? What can I not keep? I said, look, like everything in life, we can always make a deal. We can always determine what's staying, what's going, and price that accordingly.
So are you talking, when you talk assets, are you talking physical, tangible things like I'm sitting on my chair, I've got my computers, I own the building? Are those all what somebody would say are assets?
Exactly. And the goodwill of the business, the client lists,
Right.
maybe the accounts receivable, depending on the situation. The phone number, the fax number, websites, social media accounts, that could all be part of the assets that are going to be sold. And normally that's what is the main thrust of the sale, because let's be honest, your clients are the one that makes you money. Therefore, that's what the buyer wants. And it depends on the business. I mean, if it's a computer consulting business, then more likely than not, it's the client list, the goodwill, the marketing presence, not a lot of equipment. But for example, a landscaping company that I just helped, the assets were, again, the goodwill, the clients, the social media accounts, but a lot of the actual equipment. And it was good that the seller reached out to me, because there was definitely a disconnect on what equipment was going to be sold as part of the deal. The buyer thought he was going to get everything, whereas the seller was saying, no, these items were not personal, but he uses them on a regular basis for his own purpose. So those weren't going to go with the sale. And once we got it down on paper, there was discussion and negotiation. But again, what if I wasn't involved? Then when you sell all the assets, that could lead to some trouble.
Oh boy. Oh my goodness. So we talk about an asset, or we talk about a stock. So tell us about the other part. Does that happen often? And what does that mean?
Right, exactly. So a stock sale, it doesn't happen as often as an asset sale, because the benefits of doing an asset sale is it's a little bit cleaner, and it as the buyer, they want just the assets. They don't want all the liabilities. In a stock sale, you're essentially, Rita, you own a corporation, you're 100% stock owner, and the corporation owns everything in the company. So instead of transferring over the assets and the equipment, all you do is you sign over the stock certificates in its entirety over to the buyer. For you, that's a piece of cake. That's a walk. You just sign a document and you walk away and you're done. You resign as president and director. And it's a much easier process for the seller. Unfortunately, the buyer's not always enthused about that, because guess what? the corporation is still active. If there were liabilities that came with the corporation, then those are now the buyer's responsibility.
Okay.
Now, I will tell you that it doesn't happen that often, but the most recent one was, it was actually interesting. It was a printing company, and the owner of the company basically hadn't done any work in 5 years. The employee, quote unquote, was basically running the company, doing all the work, and then at the end of the day, taking a salary and then giving some money to the owner. And eventually the employee said, why don't you just transfer over everything to me? And let's do a stock sale, because A, I've been at this for 5 years. I know everything that I'm getting. And B, I know all the liabilities. It's just easier for everybody. And it was a simple closing. It was a simple stock sale agreement, and then sign the stock, and boom, she owned the company.
Wouldn't that be so nice for every owner to just turn and say, I have an employee right here that will step right in. Now, we both know that that's a journey in of itself.
That's right, Rita. And that's why I like to get you involved, because you can get that in your client's thought process of, succession planning of
Right.
How are you going to sell it? And would you rather just hand it off to your main employee, and then you don't have to worry about anything else anymore?
Right. Oh, so much just on stock and asset. What's the second step, or what's the other things that go on in that legal conversation?
So we finally determined if it's a stock or asset sale. Then we start drafting the agreement. And that's where we get into, the technical term, nitty gritty. And we determine where, when is it going to happen? What percentage are you going to put down at what time? Now, here's the other issue, which I think is great when you get involved early, Rita, is money. Because sometimes the buyer doesn't have the whole purchase price right off the bat, and they want the seller to what's called self-finance, where let's say for easy purposes, it's $100,000. The buyer's going to give you $50,000, and then let's say $10,000 for the next 5 years. Now, that helps the buyer, because they don't have to go through the whole loan process.
Right.
But at the same time, from a seller standpoint, it's from a tax standpoint, it might be good, but how do you know? How are you going to guarantee that money? And do you need that money right away? So you gotta figure out. And this is more of a buyer's problem, but as a seller standpoint, you have to decide if you're okay with the seller financing, or do you say, nope, you go get a loan, you pay me the full price. And I could tell you, Rita, when I'm the seller's counsel, that's the first thing I say is get all your money at the closing.
Oh, okay. Good advice. See, these are the best practices that I referred to in earlier on is what's the advice? Where do I start? And we're in that blind spot, because how many times do people sell a business, Jeremy? I mean, it's like, here I am. Yeah. And I may not have even bought my business. I might have started it up. So I've never been on the buyer side.
Right.
So here you are saying, let's get rid of the blind spot. Let's, squish that down so you know what you're doing even now. So, wow. Good information right there. So we're talking about the nitty gritty. Are there other nitty gritties I need to know about as a seller?
So the next one that always comes up a lot is the seller going to stay on to consult, work, help out after the closing? Okay. The buyer usually wants this because, well, the person that knows the business the best is the seller. So the buyer would like the seller to stay on in some form. Now, I, again, counsel my client, the seller, that it's never a good idea to overextend your stay after the closing. Because guess what? You, the seller, has run their business, and you've passed it on to somebody else. Guess what? The buyer's probably going to run it a little differently. So you don't want to be there to conflict with that. You want to basically do the closing and then give them, I usually recommend about 2 weeks of quote unquote training. Unpaid, of course, because you don't want to deal with wage and employment agreements. But you bake that into the sale price. You figure, your time is worth X, for an extra 10, 15,000. You're going to stay on for 2 weeks. And then maybe a third week of phone consultation if it's an emergency type situation. And then we work out the details. You're going to come, the first week, you're going to come in, let's say 25 hours. The next week, you're going to do 15 hours. And then the third week, it's, off and on phone calls as necessary. And then, worst case scenario, maybe, an emergency phone call every now and then. Too often sellers think, well, I have to stay on because there's no way they're going to be able to figure this out. I need to be there. And my response is, I appreciate that, but that's not your responsibility. Once you sign that, do the closing, you sign that bill of sale, you can just, your responsibility stops and their responsibility starts. But some clients are insistent, and then then we work out how long are they going to stay and what sort of salary they're going to get. For example, I just did one where the seller, we sold her dental practice, and that's a little different in that, because from a customer service base, you don't want your dentist to change halfway through a procedure. So we worked it out. So anything that was my client's clients, essentially, their procedures, she would work on those until they were completed. And then the new dentist, the buyer, would take over from there.
I have a couple of questions, because I get this a lot in that, as you call it, succession planning. I call it sometimes passing the torch if it's a family matter. But in the case of a buying and selling, I have clients who have been in business for 30 years, and they grew the business, and the business is a brand, and the brand is them. And so when they sell, that they will be selling the name won't get changed. So they're so ready to go that whole year after I sell, get paid, because that's still my name. And it had such high quality, and it's well known, in a county or in a state or across the, and so there's you can see the tension that they have in letting go, because it's their legacy. And yes, they're done. Psychologically, they're done, but are they really done? And that's what I love hearing about. What is your point of view on how do you get people to, or do you have to get people to, just let go?
Rita, you're so right. And I've come across that a few times, and it's like their kid is going away to college and they just don't want to let the kid go. And you have to explain to them, your child is grown. It's time to let the child go off. And they say, well, I just want to be there and stay on. And some clients have even suggested staying on as an employee forever. And I said, well, the whole point of you selling your company is so you could either A, retire or do something different. Or, I mean, if you were going to continue to work at the company, why wouldn't you keep the company? So yes, Rita, sometimes you have to have that sit down moment with your clients and say, let's have some expectations about what you're looking for regarding your sale. Do you want to just not manage it anymore? Or do you just want to be an employee? Or do you really just want to let it go? And you have to let them know that, don't forget, you're the boss now. You sell it. You're not the boss anymore. How's that going to work for you? I mean, you're telling everyone what to do. Now people are telling you what to do. I tell my clients, I said, I guarantee you in 3 or 4 months, there's going to be some sort of conflict, and you're going to get into a fight, and you're going to quit, and it's going to get ugly. let's cap it off at 2 months, maybe 3 months. And then you just gotta be happy and just take that deep breath and go, relax on the beach somewhere.
Well, I am borrowing that you let your kid go to college. Let's see how that works in my next call that I have going. So you have a couple of more. How are we doing? We've got about 4 more minutes, and I'm going to wrap up. So how about if we take a couple of more minutes and just see what the last set of flow looks like as we get prepared for that sale and for that close?
Absolutely. So the last major 2 points are part of the sale may be an assignment of the lease of the building where the business is. So you're transferring not only the assets, but the physical location, and you need to negotiate with the landlord regarding that assignment. More often than not, the landlord is completely fine with that. You sign the lease, the buyer comes in, takes over the lease, or usually they redo the lease. But that's something to consider. I mean, if you're leasing your building, you got to make sure that, or if you own the building, is the buyer going to buy the building? Are you going to lease it to the buyer? Just have to figure those things out when there's a physical location. The other one, which pops up a lot is in talking about continuing to work, is non-compete and non-solicitation.
Yeah.
And what that is the buyer is going to not want you to open a competing business across the street. If you're a, I get a lot of, landscapers for some reason. The buyer doesn't want you to sell them the landscape company and you open a landscape company across the street, because guess what? Your clients are going to think this is going to stay. So we have to negotiate, how long is the non-compete going to be for? And what's the distance? More often than not, a lot of sellers say, I don't care, I'm done. They've got to that point where they say, I'm happy to walk away. But some are thinking, I want to do another business down the road. I want to limit this to maybe 4 years, 3 years. And non-solicitation is basically you won't steal your former clients. That's pretty typical. But the non-compete is where we want to negotiate the distance, the time, how are you going to go back to work? How soon and where do you think you'll work?
Wow. Jeremy, we need to wrap up. Can you believe this? This is,
I know.
It's just gone just like that. But we know at the end of this program that your credits, they know how to contact you, Jeremy. So I want to say thank you so much for crowding in so much of information that is so valuable. Really, really appreciate it. And let me wrap up now, Jeremy. For the viewers here today, please contact Jeremy if you have any need for any legal matters that are business legal matters. He's awesome and someone who can help you with the sale, but help you with many other things. And Jeremy and I have decided to do a Q&A. So besides just listening to both of us, you now have a chance to do some questions. And in order to do that, you need to go to ritacococonsulting.com. There you will see my contact page. Put in your email. I promise not to spam you. I just am going to send you an invite to our Q&A session in May. It is free. And so now, if you have gotten one morsel of information from this time together, episode 4 happens sometime in May. Do contact WACA TV and look up when we are on next. And our next is about retirement plans for the business owner. Yes, I know that's in the future, but as Jeremy and I said, the future is tomorrow. So with that, I want to say, have a great month, and we will see you soon. And until then, take care.